He asked me to stand next to him at the altar, not as his best man, not as a friend, as the groom, just for one day, just long enough for his mother to believe he had healed. He said the words like they were harmless. Like this wasn't the same mouth that once whispered, "I love you" between sheets, the same mouth that disappeared 3 years ago without so much as a goodbye, the same mouth that now looked at me across a table in a polished cafe and said, "It's not real. It's just a performance for her." And I, like a fool, nodded because part of me, the part that still hadn't forgiven him, hadn't stopped loving him either. His name was Daniel, and once upon a time, he was everything I thought I couldn't live without. I met Daniel in college, during a time in my life when I was still figuring out how to take up space without apology. I was the kind of gay kid who grew up learning to be quiet about it, not because I was ashamed, but because I was tired of explaining. My world had always been a series of edits. Don't talk too loud, don't smile too soft, don't wear that color, don't walk that way. But architecture gave me a language where precision and beauty didn't need to justify themselves. That's how I met him, at a lecture about minimalist design. Daniel was the kind of person who filled a room without trying. Broad shoulders, voice like smooth gravel, and a calmness that drew you in before you could decide whether it was safe. He sat next to me like we'd planned it, like fate was lazy and just wanted us in the same row. He asked what I thought of the speaker. I gave him a rehearsed answer. He smirked and said, "You talk like someone who doesn't believe their own opinion." I didn't know whether to be offended or impressed. I stayed after class, hoping he would too. He did. That's how it started. We were never official, not on paper, not on social media, not in daylight, but at night, we were real, in shared playlists, in long texts with no punctuation, in the way he touched the back of my neck when no one was looking, in the way we always left space between us in public. But that space hummed with everything we didn't say. He told me he wasn't ready, that his family wouldn't understand, that he wasn't like me. I thought that meant he needed time. I thought love could fix it. I thought I could wait. Then one day he just left. No warning, no fight, just silence, where his name used to live in my mouth. And I let him go. What else could I do? I told myself he was just afraid that maybe one day he'd come back. Not because I needed him to, but because stories like ours don't just vanish. They linger. They echo. Turns out I was right. He did come back. But not for love, not for me. He came back because his mother was sick. And he needed a story she could accept. When Daniel reached out to me, it had been 3 years. I was living in the city by then, working as a creative consultant for a boutique event firm. My life was orderly, structured. My apartment was small but filled with light. My friends were warm. My therapist said I was doing well. Then came the message, "Hey, it's Daniel. I know it's been a long time. Can I see you? It's important." I didn't answer at first. I stared at it for hours, days even, wondering what kind of man resurfaces after ghosting you for years with a line like, "It's important." But curiosity is cruel when it's mixed with unresolved love. So I said yes. We met at a cafe near the park, neutral ground. He looked the same tired eyes, same worn leather jacket, same half smile that once made me forget how many people were watching us and how far apart we stood in public. But there was something else, a weight. Like he was older even if he wasn't. He didn't waste time. "My mother's sick," he said. "Stage 4, it's moving fast." I blinked. "I'm sorry." He nodded. "She's religious, traditional, you know how it was." "Yes." I knew. I remembered how he used to mute his phone when she called, how he would panic when I left a hoodie at his place, how he once told me she wouldn't survive knowing. He looked at me then, directly. "She wants to see me get married." I didn't understand at first. I thought he meant he was engaged, that he wanted me to be there. I even wondered, briefly, if he had come to tell me he was ready now, that after all this time, after everything, he'd chosen me. But then he said, "I told her I've been seeing someone serious," and I showed her a photo of us, an old one. My stomach dropped. "I didn't know what else to do," he added. She was crying. She said she always prayed I'd find a good girl, but that maybe someone like you could bring me back to the right path. I laughed, not because it was funny, because it was devastating. "You told her I was your what?" Your redemption story? His jaw clenched. No, not like that. I told her you're special, that we're different, that I was wrong to walk away. You were wrong to lie, I snapped. He leaned forward. I'm asking for one day, one rehearsal dinner, one ceremony, nothing legal, nothing binding. Just help me let her go peacefully, please. I wanted to scream. Instead, I asked the worst question of all, and what do I get? He looked down, and then he said something I didn't expect. Closure. It's strange, the things grief makes you consider. He wasn't offering love, he wasn't even offering truth. He was offering an ending, and I, stupid, bruised, still not over it, thought maybe this was my chance to take control of the story for once. Maybe if I played along, I could finally walk away on my terms. So I said yes. And that's how I became a fake groom, in a fake wedding, for a mother who didn't know I existed, except as a lie she could tolerate. The first time I tried on the suit, it fit too well. Dark gray, perfectly tailored, not too formal, but just enough to say, I belong here. A stylist, hired by Daniel's fiancée, adjusted the lapel and smiled at me like I was part of the family. She didn't know. No one did. To the outside world, I was just a friend, a helper, a name that didn't need explaining. But behind the closed doors of this twisted theater, I was a ghost made solid, a past rewritten into something his mother could accept. Try not to outshine the groom, someone joked as I stepped in front of the mirror. But I was the groom, just not the one who got to stay. The rehearsal dinner was worse. I was seated at the table next to Daniel, close enough for his mother to beam, far enough for his bride-to-be not to notice the tension humming beneath the napkins. Daniel introduced me as a dear friend from college. I smiled, because if I didn't, I might have broken. His mother reached for my hand at one point. Her fingers were soft, worn by years of rosary beads and folded prayers. She looked at me like I was her miracle. I always hoped he'd find someone to set him straight, she said gently. And I knew it couldn't be a girl, not really. He needed someone strong. I swallowed. And for the first time in years, I felt ashamed of who I was. Not because I didn't belong, but because I was being used as proof that someone like me could be rebranded, turned into a cautionary tale with a happy ending. That night, I sat in the guest room they'd prepared for me, staring at the closet full of coordinated outfits, the carefully printed itinerary, the pair of shoes labeled Groom rehearsal. I wanted to burn it all, but instead, I stared at my reflection in the mirror, the same one Daniel used to lean into when he kissed me from behind. I touched the collar of the suit jacket and whispered, "Do you see me now?" No one answered. Because this was a stage, and I was just a prop. I didn't sleep. At 3 a.m., I walked out into the backyard. The garden lights were still on. Daniel was there, barefoot, smoking, staring into nothing. He turned when he heard me. "You okay?" he asked. I almost laughed. He walked toward me. The air between us didn't feel like years. It felt like yesterday. Like the night he disappeared, like the version of him I used to love was just beneath the surface, begging to come up for air. "You shouldn't have asked me to do this," I said. "I know. I'm not your redemption arc." "I know." "Then why did you?" He hesitated, then said softly, "Because part of me wanted to see if you'd still show up." My chest tightened, and in that moment I realized something cruel. He didn't just want forgiveness. He wanted proof that I still loved him, because if I did, then everything he did mattered less, and I, broken, stupid, still human, had walked right into it. They assigned me a role, not officially, but I had no name tag, no title, but I became something between event assistant and family liaison. "Could you check the table layout? His mother wants to adjust the flower arrangements. Make sure Daniel's boutonniere matches his father's tie. You have such good taste. Thank you for helping." It was almost laughable. I was the I was the original, and now I was being thanked for making the bride's vision come to life. I met her on day 3. Her name was Charlotte. She was stunning, in the way some women glow with curated elegance, perfect posture, warm smile, a voice that felt like a soft piano key, and she liked me. A lot. We shared iced coffee over planning notes. She asked about college memories with Daniel. She laughed when I told her about the time he got us lost in a botanical garden for 2 hours. She didn't know that garden was the place Daniel first reached for my hand and didn't let go, even when strangers passed. She didn't know he used to call me the calm in his storm. She didn't know I had once imagined him in a tuxedo too, just facing me, not her. But I smiled. I played along, because that's what I had signed up for, right? A role, not a heart. Later that night, I sat in the hotel bathtub, water gone cold, my phone in hand. I opened our old messages. The last real one read, "You make me feel like maybe I'm not broken." I had replied, "You're not broken, you're just scared." And I'll wait. I never got an answer. I waited anyway. Daniel knocked on the door the next morning. He brought breakfast like we were roommates, like none of this was bleeding me dry from the inside. "Charlotte likes you," he said. "Says you're calm, centered." I stared at him. "I used to be," I said, "before you taught me how easy it is to be rewritten." He didn't respond, but his eyes softened, just a little. And in that flicker, I saw the version of him I used to love, the one who whispered music lyrics into my neck, the one who cried the night after his first panic attack, the one who asked me, drunkenly once, if I believed people like us deserved a happy ending. I looked away, because ghosts don't belong in sunlight. The day ended with a dinner rehearsal checklist. I was told to make sure the groom stays focused. I almost asked which groom they meant, but I stayed quiet. Because if I spoke, I might say something real, and real things have no place in rehearsed weddings. As I lay in bed that night, my throat tight and chest sore, I asked myself the one question I had been avoiding. If I was never going to be chosen, why did I keep showing up like I was? The rehearsal took place at a vineyard. It was the kind of venue people picked for fairy tale weddings. Sun-drenched fields, white wooden chairs lined in symmetry, candles suspended in glass, and an aisle long enough to walk away from anything. I stood under the oak archway watching people bustle around with clipboards and color-coded timelines. Charlotte was glowing in a simple white sundress, laughing with her sister. Daniel adjusted his cuffs in silence. I was told to stand stage left, out of camera range. Just close enough to observe, just far enough to disappear. One of the coordinators handed me a fake boutonniere. "For rehearsal purposes," she smiled. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. They walked through the entrance twice, first slowly, then to music. The song was some acoustic rendition of "Can't Help Falling in Love," and it echoed through the speakers like a joke written just for me. Daniel looked at her the way I once prayed he'd look at me in public, soft, focused, practiced. She didn't see the flicker in his eyes. But I did, because I used to live in that flicker, the space between truth and performance, the breath he held when someone said something too gay, the stiffness in his shoulders when his phone lit up with my name. And now, here we were, he playing the role of a man healed, she playing the role of a woman chosen, and me, the prop. Again, during a break, Charlotte came over, cheeks flushed from excitement. "I'm so glad you're here," she said. "You keep Daniel grounded." I opened my mouth, closed it again. She handed me a small card. "It's silly, but we're giving personal thank yous during the dinner. I wrote you one." I stared at the envelope. My name in cursive with a little heart I wanted to disappear into the vineyard soil, but I smiled. "Thank you," I said. "That's really kind." "You've been so much more than a friend in all this," she said. "Yeah, you're like family." I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. Later that evening, as the rehearsal dinner began and people clinked glasses over roasted lamb and soft jazz, Daniel pulled me aside. We stood beneath a string of fairy lights, the kind meant to make everything feel magical, even the ugliest truths. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at me. Finally he whispered, "You're angry." "No," I replied. "I'm exhausted. Lucas." I said yes to this because I thought it might mean something. I said, "Closure, peace." "A clean exit," he stared. "But this," I continued, this isn't closure. This is a funeral dressed as a wedding, and I'm the only one mourning." He stepped closer. "It's almost over." I looked him dead in the eye. "You don't get to use love like a costume and then hang it back in the closet when the night's done." I walked away before he could respond, back into the noise, the clatter of silverware, the smiles that didn't reach eyes. Charlotte gave a toast, thanked everyone who helped shape Daniel into the man he is today. She glanced at me when she said it. and I realized she didn't know I was the chisel. She only saw the sculpture. The toast went on longer than expected. Laughter rolled over the tables like gentle waves, easy, warm, oblivious. Everyone had stories about Daniel, how he was loyal, how he never gave up, how he always followed his heart. I wanted to scream, because I had loved that heart when it was still beating in the dark, when it wasn't brave, when it only whispered my name after midnight. Now it beat loudly, proudly, in the arms of someone it didn't have to hide from. And yet I stayed, because part of me still needed to see how far he'd go. After the last toast, the DJ played something soft, something slow, the kind of song that lives in first dances and memory reels. Daniel took Charlotte's hand and led her to the center of the garden. They danced like no one was watching. But everyone was, and me, I was watching too hard. Because halfway through the second verse, he leaned in and said something. I didn't hear it, but I didn't have to. Because I knew that look, that half smile, that drop in his voice. It was the same way he used to say, I love you to me, quiet, confessional, like a secret that tasted too good to share. Charlotte laughed and held him tighter, and I broke. Not because I had hoped for him to choose me again, but because I finally understood he never stopped knowing how to love. He just stopped being afraid to do it publicly, and he chose her to debut that courage. I walked away, left the garden, left the lights, left the voices, found a quiet corner behind the catering tent and sat on a crate of unused wine glasses. I didn't cry. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But instead I sat there shaking, staring at my hands like they were someone else's. Like maybe if I looked long enough, I could unremember every time he'd held them. A voice broke the silence. You okay? It was one of the groomsmen. Tall. Kind eyes. I didn't know his name. Yeah, I lied. He nodded and handed me a bottle of water. Weddings are intense, he said. I laughed, bitter and short. That's one word for it. He studied me for a moment. You're Lucas, right? I stiffened. Daniel's old friend? Something like that. He smiled. He talks about you. I blinked. Not specifics, he added quickly. Just that you helped him figure things out. That you were there when he didn't know who he was yet. I looked away. Anyway, the groomsman said, I think that kind of presence matters, even if it's not the forever kind. And then he left, just like that. But his words stayed. I had been the presence, the one who helped him figure it out. The bridge, the mirror, the learning curve. And now I was supposed to fade quietly into the background so he could walk into his sunset, clean, redeemed, intact. But I wasn't background. I had bled for this man, and he had turned that blood into a love story for someone else. I didn't go to the final rehearsal the next morning. I didn't answer the texts, the calls, the knocks on the hotel door. I just sat by the window watching the wind tear through the vineyard rows like it was trying to clean the place of every lie. By noon, I packed my things. I didn't leave a note on the bed. I didn't explain, but I did leave something behind. On Daniel's side of the closet, I hung the suit, pressed, perfect, untouched. Inside the jacket pocket, I placed a small envelope. No name on the outside, no need. Inside was a single photo. Us, from college, the only one we ever took, where he let himself look at me like it meant something. On the back, I had written, if I was ever the cure, then you were never sick. You were just scared. I didn't wait for the ceremony. I didn't wait for the fallout. I booked a flight, took a cab to the airport, turned off my phone before the wheels left the ground. And as the plane climbed into the sky, I closed my eyes and whispered, not to him, but to the version of myself I was leaving behind. You showed up, even when it hurt. Now it's time to go. I didn't cry until the hotel in the next city. Not out of heartbreak, but because I had finally done the one thing love had never taught me, leave, before I disappeared completely. I landed in Portland on a Tuesday. It was gray, soft rain draped over the city like a secret, the kind of weather that made you feel both invisible and somehow seen, all at once. I didn't know why I chose Portland, maybe because it was far enough to feel new, but familiar enough not to feel like I'd run away. Maybe because I liked the way the buildings looked, old but still standing. Like me. The Airbnb was small, just one room and a kitchenette. but it had a big window facing a tree that hadn't lost all its leaves yet. I sat there every morning with coffee I didn't finish, watching squirrels pretend the world wasn't falling apart. I didn't tell anyone where I was, not my coworkers, not my friends, not even my sister, who had always warned me about Daniel, especially not Daniel. The first week was numb. I wandered through bookstores, lost track of hours in art galleries, listened to strangers talk about things that didn't matter. I liked the noise. It gave shape to the silence inside me. I told myself I had made the right choice, that leaving was power, but some nights when the wind hit just right, I'd remember his mother's eyes, how she looked at me like I was the answer, how she touched my hand like it meant salvation. She didn't know I was the question all along. I avoided mirrors, not because I hated what I saw, but because I didn't recognize him. The Lucas who had said yes, the Lucas who had stood under fairy lights and smiled for cameras that weren't meant to keep him, the Lucas who thought he could finally leave on his own terms, but still left carrying pieces that didn't belong to him anymore. On day 10, I met someone, not romantically, not yet, just someone. He was sitting at the bar of a tiny jazz cafe, sketching in a worn notebook. He had ink on his fingers and a nose ring that didn't suit him, but somehow worked anyway. I ordered a drink and sat 2 stools away. He looked over, smiled. "You look like someone who used to be in love," he said. I blinked. "You look like someone who used to believe it was enough." I gave a tight laugh. "And what do I look like now? Someone who's not sure if they ever want to try again." He wasn't wrong. We talked for an hour. His name was Ari. He was an illustrator. He believed in sharp lines, messy emotions, and breakfast at any time of day. He didn't ask for my past, but I told him anyway. Not the full story, just the outlines. The ones I hadn't dared to say out loud yet. When I finished, he nodded and said, "People always talk about heartbreak like something was taken, but sometimes heartbreak is what's returned." I didn't get his number. Didn't ask to meet again. But that night, I wrote in my journal for the first time in weeks. Maybe I wasn't abandoned. Maybe I was released. The letter arrived on a Saturday, tucked between a takeout menu and a bill. No return address. Just my name, handwritten in elegant looping cursive I recognized from the thank you card she gave me during the rehearsal dinner. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't open it at the table. I didn't open it with music playing. I didn't even breathe for a full minute. I waited until the sky turned lilac and the room dimmed, until I felt like a person again. Then I opened it. "Dear Lucas, you don't owe me your time, but I hope you'll give me a few minutes anyway. I don't know if you remember, but I watched you a lot during that week, maybe more than I should have." I knew something was off. I knew it the way mothers know their sons are lying, even when their mouths say all the right words, but I didn't want it to be true. I didn't want my son to be afraid. I didn't want him to think I couldn't love him exactly as he was, so I played along, just like you did. I stopped reading. The air had thickened. I forced myself to keep going. When you left, he told me it was a scheduling conflict, but his eyes were different, and I knew. I found the photo, the one you left. I read the words on the back. "I want you to know I'm not angry. I'm grateful, because you gave him more truth in a week than I gave him in a lifetime. He won't talk about you now, but he flinches when your name comes up. He gets quiet. He stares at the chair you used to sit in, and I think he's finally realizing what it costs to hide behind love instead of standing in it. I don't know where you are, but wherever it is, I hope it's gentle, I hope it's clean, and I hope you never again let yourself be someone else's silence." There was no signature, just a line at the end. I thought I was watching a wedding, but I was watching a goodbye. I folded the letter and placed it on the table like it might break. Then I cried. Not the kind of cry that begs to be heard, the kind that shakes from the center of your spine, the kind that leaks out of you after holding too much for too long, the kind that finally makes space. Later that night, I sat on the floor of my new apartment with the window open, letting the cold come in. No music, no wine, no poems to hide behind. Just me, breathing, existing. And for once, not explaining. The next morning, I walked to the corner bookstore. It was early. The kind of early where the city still yawns, where shelves creak like they're waking up, and coffee machines hiss like whispers. I bought a journal, hardbound, deep green, gold edges, heavy, like it knew it was about to hold things that weren't meant to be light. I brought it home, tore off the wrapping, opened to the first page, and wrote, "This is not a love story." I didn't stop there. I wrote about the first time Daniel and I kissed, in the back of a friend's car, hearts pounding, afraid to call it anything but a mistake. I wrote about how he made me feel visible and invisible in the same breath, how I stayed, how I lied to myself, how I waited. I wrote about the vineyard, the suit, the fake boutonniere, the mother who saw more than she said, and I wrote about walking away before I disappeared entirely. By the end of the week, I had 50 pages, not clean, not structured, just raw truth. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was trying to win or prove or justify. I was just releasing. On Friday, I walked into a local community center. They had a bulletin board of events. One flyer caught my eye. Queer storytelling circle. No judgment, no labels, just your voice. I tore off a tab, not because I was ready, but because maybe, just maybe, I was tired of living in parentheses. That night, I left the window open again, and as the wind moved through my apartment like a slow, careful hand, I whispered into the dark, "I'm not someone's lesson. I'm not someone's guilt. I'm not someone's secret." And this time I believed it. I didn't expect to see him, not in that city, not in that bookstore. Not on a Tuesday afternoon when the rain had finally decided to let up, and I was just looking for a place to be warm and unbothered. But there he was, Daniel, leaning against the aisle of travel books, flipping through a guide to Japan, like he hadn't once built a false future with me under fairy lights and family lies. He didn't see me at first, and for a second, a dangerous, disorienting second, I considered leaving quietly, completely, but I stayed because I wasn't hiding anymore, not even from the past. He looked up. Our eyes met, and the world didn't break. The air didn't shift. My chest didn't collapse the way it used to. He blinked. Lucas. It wasn't a question. Just a name, one he used to whisper like a prayer, now spoken like a memory. I nodded. Daniel. Silence. Not the old kind, not loaded, not trembling, just absence. In full form, he stepped closer. "Can we talk?" I hesitated. Then said, "Only if you're not trying to fix anything." He smiled, almost ashamed. "I'm not." We sat in a quiet corner of the cafe attached to the bookstore, 2 cups of coffee. One table, a past sitting between us like a third heavier presence. He looked tired. Not in the way people look when they haven't slept, in the way people look when they've run out of stories to hide behind. He took a sip, set the cup down. "I don't know where to start," I shrugged. "Then don't." His fingers traced the rim of the mug. "You left before the ceremony. You thought I wouldn't?" "No, I knew you would. I just hoped you wouldn't." I tilted my head. "Why?" He looked up. "Because if you stayed, I could have convinced myself it didn't hurt you." "I was a coward," Daniel said. The words didn't surprise me. I'd heard them before in different forms from different mouths, but hearing them from him still felt like standing in a house that had already burned down. "I thought if I could build a life that looked right," he continued, "maybe I'd become someone who deserved to be loved publicly." I didn't respond. He went on, "I knew I loved you. I just didn't know if I could survive being known for it." That one stung. Not because it was new, but because it was still true. "And Charlotte?" I asked quietly. "She didn't know," he said. "Not then, not until after. And now, she left." "A month after the wedding," said she married a mask. I nodded. It was strange hearing that. Not satisfying, not tragic, just inevitable. He looked at me, eyes softer than I remembered. "I've wanted to say sorry 100 times." I held up a hand. "Don't." He blinked. "Why not?" "Because I didn't come here for an apology." I leaned back in my chair. "I came here to see if you still needed me to carry it for you." The silence that followed was different than any silence we'd ever shared. It didn't hurt, it didn't echo, it just sat between us like something finally laid to rest. He lowered his eyes. "You don't owe me anything." "I know," I said, "and I meant it." He looked like he wanted to reach for my hand. He didn't, and that was perhaps the bravest thing he'd ever done with me, not reaching. We finished our coffee. No tears, no goodbyes. just two people who used to be a story, and now we're just chapters in different books. I left the cafe before him. No lingering look, no dramatic turn of the head, just the soft sound of a door closing behind me, and with it, a decade of wait. The air outside felt cleaner than I remembered, or maybe it was just me finally breathing differently. I walked down the block, hands in pockets, unsure where I was going. But for the first time, I didn't care. I wasn't running, I wasn't waiting. I was moving. Later that night, I joined the queer storytelling circle at the community center. There were 7 of us, some older, some shy, some angry. All of us holding something we weren't sure the world wanted to hear. When it was my turn, I cleared my throat, held my journal, and began. I was the groom, I said, but only in rehearsal. A few people chuckled. The kind of chuckle that comes from recognition. I smiled. I stood at an altar that wasn't mine, next to a man who never called me his, in front of people who didn't know they were clapping for a lie. Silence. But not pity, just listening. I don't tell this story because I'm bitter, I said. I tell it because I'm done carrying it alone. Afterward, a woman in her 50s came up to me. She had tears in her eyes, but her voice was steady. Thank you, she said. I left a 20-year marriage for the same reason you left that vineyard. I nodded. Because pretending costs more than losing, she smiled. Exactly. That night, I walked home under a sky full of stars I hadn't noticed in weeks. When I reached my building, I stopped on the stoop and looked up, and for the first time since Daniel, I laughed. Not loudly, not bitterly, just enough to know I was still here, still whole, still mine. A year later, I wasn't healed, but I was building. My morning started with quiet jazz, a chipped mug I'd grown attached to, and sunlight filtering through half-open blinds. My apartment was still small, but now it felt like mine, the kind of place where books stack up faster than clothes, and laughter has started to settle into the corners. I had a new job, a slower one, community work, helping queer youth plan safe events, find their voice, their space. I wasn't famous, I wasn't in love, but I was free. Some days I still thought of him, not with longing, not with rage, just with recognition. Like looking at a scar you don't hide anymore. Daniel had reached out once after that cafe. A short message, simple. Thank you for letting me say it out loud. I didn't respond, because his healing wasn't mine to manage anymore. One Thursday afternoon, I ran into Ari again. Same jazz cafe, same notebook. He smiled when he saw me, not surprised, just glad. You look lighter, he said. I feel real, I replied. He grinned. Want to sit? I did. And we didn't talk about love. We talked about plants and the weather and why pancakes taste better after 8 p.m. It wasn't romantic, but it was honest. And for the first time, that was enough. A few months later, I was invited to speak at a local storytelling event. The theme was undoing. I stood backstage holding the green journal that had followed me through rain and recovery. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I just wanted to say the truth out loud, with no one flinching. When I walked out, the lights didn't blind me this time. I looked into the crowd, maybe 50 people, maybe more, and opened my journal. I was the groom, I began. But only in rehearsal, laughter, gentle, knowing. I kept going. I stood beside a man who once told me he loved me, but only when no one else could hear it. I said yes to playing his story because I thought if I gave him closure, I'd find mine too. A pause. But closure isn't something someone gives you. It's something you build. I ended my story not with tears, not with bitterness, but with this. If you've ever been someone's shadow, remember, the sun doesn't rise without you. I'm not angry anymore. I'm awake. After the event, people came up, some to thank me, some to cry, some to simply hold eye contact and nod, like they were saying me too, without words. I walked home under a sky with no clouds. And when I got to my front door, I turned back and whispered to the night, you did it, you lived through it, and now you get to write everything else. If this story meant something to you, even just one line, one breath, one mirror you saw yourself in, don't forget to subscribe. Not just for more stories, but because somewhere out there, someone needs to know they're not alone in the almosts. They're not invisible in the shadows. And they're never just a backup, they're the whole damn story.